Welcome to now our third annual Healthcare Forum. So wonderful to have you with us tonight, to have a time to mingle and connect with each other during the 4 o'clock hour, to enjoy the panel discussion that we'll take away today, and then to transition into our advisory groups. So thank you for being here. It's fun to look around those name tags and to meet fellow advisory board members, and many of our students are with us tonight. They want to be brave and talk to you employers. They may need your encouragement, right? Right. All right. It is a privilege for me to introduce you to MCC's president, Dr. Clint Gabbard, to provide some words of welcome.
Welcome. I am so grateful that you're here, and doubly or even triply, except that's probably not a word, grateful that you're willing to serve on advisory committees. Our programs, our thoughts, some of our keen interests in the future really do hinge on feedback from people who are serving in professions across our county, and are thinking about the future, who are dealing with the challenges and the opportunities. We do listen, and everybody who chooses to serve on an advisory committee, thank you. It means a lot to us. I am sure you might be as tired as some of us in education are with the weekly news chronicling the Great Resignation. Anybody not heard of the Great Resignation? Of course, you all have. Among 10 healthcare professions in McHenry County, including nursing, 25% of professionals are over age 55, and some estimates suggest that 580 practitioners may be retiring soon, and that's just among 10 healthcare professions. Healthcare doesn't stand alone among the high-stress professions that were pounded by the wrecking ball of the pandemic. Education saw unprecedented stressors. My wife, a 30-year teacher, has watched with some surprise and even alarm as so many of her colleagues are saying, enough is enough. And yet, we're amazed to watch young people move into the fray, step into the gaps that are being created by the openings in these jobs and by this Great Resignation. In our own family, we watched our son just last year step into teaching in the Chicago public schools. We watched our daughter's partner become a newly minted Chicago firefighter. There are men and women around us who are ready to take up the challenge, and they're ready to thoughtfully disregard the risks and step into their calling in the healthcare professions. But they're going to need some help. For those men and women in our county considering or entering a healthcare profession, we've got some really good news. We have the right kind of hope providing very tangible support. This year, McHenry County College successfully wrote and received the PATH grant, which includes $550,000 for fiscal year 23. This is a state grant. It's focused on giving new students and incumbent workers seeking more training in 7 occupations, free tuition and fees, free books and materials. The support includes wraparound services like mentoring and coaching, transportation assistance, child care assistance. These programs include nursing assistant, EKG technician, emergency care attendant, EMT paramedic, phlebotomy technician, medical assistant, and nursing. Ambitiously, we've set our sights on training 500 people in these 7 occupations in fiscal year 2023. And we don't believe that the state is necessarily done supporting this kind of work, and that these may not be one-time funds. We may see them again, if we're able to hit our marks. This is good news. This is good news for those who want to be our healthcare first responders in our community, on the front line of healthcare. For some, the pandemic, for them, was a call to action, a source of direction to become a part of the caregiving of our county. And they know that our county is going to continue to have these needs. There's no magic pill, well, that's a bad pun. There's no magic pill, I'm saying, to providers to eliminate all the need for trained healthcare professionals, but MCC can be a part of the web of activities to find and train the next generation of caregivers. This includes activities that have already happened, like the first countywide health and career expo that was offered at D155 that was hosted in March to link employers, educators, together with high school students and their parents, and just catch just that little glimmer from these students that they think they might have that calling to be a healthcare provider. Like the training lab at D155 in Crystal Lake that was funded through federal COVID relief dollars that sets up our ability to offer dual credit high school training in basic nursing and EKG training. Like the program at Harvard D50 to support short-term training and lead to credentials. Like the new health information training partnerships that have been set up with Advocate Sherman Hospital and Independence Health and Therapy. The best thing that you can say about a community college, the thing I always want to hear, is that we are first responders when it comes to employers' needs, when it comes to communities' needs for training and learning. We are in the business of stepping in and trying to help where we can. And at the end of the day, honestly, we take our inspiration from people like you, the true first responders, caring for us, caring for our family members, there for us when we need you the most. So, never want to forget to say thank you for your service. And thank you for the partnering that's going on to make sure that the training is there to fill the jobs that we so desperately need. So have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you. I'll ask our panel to come forward. We want to dig into a discussion tonight on patient advocacy and what some of the barriers can be. We are delighted with the panel that has joined us today. You'll learn more about them, and in your program booklet, you'll see their full bios. We make the decision at our panel discussions not to read their bios word for word for word. But there's good information in there, so please take a look at that. And we are delighted to have Dr. Christine Louderman, who will be our panel moderator this afternoon. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am so excited to see so many faces here. Thank you for joining us. We have a wonderful panel here, and I'm going to let each one of them give a very brief introduction so you know who is answering these wonderful questions. These questions that we have, some are provided by us, and some are provided when you registered for the event. So these are some of your questions as well. So first up, we have Kim. Would you give us a quick introduction, please?
Sure. Hello, everybody. So I teach at a community college down the road. I'm in Elgin Community College, and I'm in the physical therapist assistant program, just like you are. I've been there for 27 years, so I've seen a lot. And I think one of the reasons maybe I landed here tonight is I serve as the co-chair of the Illinois Physical Therapy Association's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee. So is that how I got here?
That is exactly how you got here.
Okay, so I'm a mom, I'm a grandma, I'm a provider. I think that's the nuts and bolts of it.
So your first question goes to you, and of course it's going to be on that topic. Really, how do demographics, race, ethnicity, gender, play a role in access to care? And can you explain implicit bias and how that has a role in healthcare?
Okay. So I really think the question is really, we just have to acknowledge that there are disparities in healthcare that we cannot explain, right? We can look at the social determinants of health, we can look at your neighborhood, we can look at economic status, we can parse all of those things out, but race and racism, really the impact of racism, it's not just your race, it's not just that you're Latino or Hispanic or you check the box as African American, it's the impact of the racism that people experience, and not from individuals. I'm not going around and discriminating against people, but the systems that we work and live in are causing people to not benefit from everything the community has to offer. So I can look at your zip code. I got my talking notes. We can't explain all of that stuff. We can look at the historical perspectives and practices that maybe are still in place today. So the things I would look at would be pulmonary function tests that date back to Thomas Jefferson and Dr. Samuel Cartwright. We still apply those kinds of, we factor in for race with pulmonary function tests, and there's nothing genetic about it. They did those tests on people who lived in squalor. Of course, their pulmonary function was going to be impaired. We still apply glomerular filtration rate. We factor in for race with that. So we look at kidney failure, and we're not capturing early enough people who need treatment. We're waiting until they need to be now on the list for a kidney transplant. We also use race as a factor for calculating your risk of heart disease. And it's nothing genetic. Race is a social construct. So we really need to sort of unpack and look at the historical impact on the healthcare disparities that we're seeing. I mean, in the news, we saw things with, our tennis player, Serena Williams, having a baby and almost dying. And because we know that the infant and maternal mortality rates for people of color are higher than people who are white, and that doesn't matter, the social determinants of health don't matter, right? We can compare that data to people who live in the Appalachian Mountains, and their outcomes are still better. So we have to unpack that. We have to address those disparities in health and healthcare. It's an equity issue, and it's costing our country money, right? We need to do this for our communities. We need to do this for our country because our nation's overall health is costing us money, right? If there are people who are not being served. So people of color, people underserved communities, they experience higher rates of illness, higher rates of death. You name the condition, whatever it is, the research is telling us that this is here. And if you want to, I'm reading a book right now, I just want to put in a plug for it. Linda Villarosa, she's got a book called Under the Skin, and she manages to weave in these little anecdotal stories and experiences with data, with the science, right? And it really is impacting me in ways that I'm always trying to learn something. Every time I think I know something, I realize I don't, because I cannot understand the experience of others unless I listen. And so I think the question really is, we need to look at the impact of racism, and it's in our systems. It's embedded in our healthcare system. It's embedded in the tests that we do. And we just need to do a better job of unpacking that and recognizing that. Did I answer that? Okay.
Fantastically. So next, I'm moving to Noelle, and I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Noelle Moore. I am with the HAP Foundation, and we focus our work in the space of serious illness care, so really looking at hospice, palliative care, and expanding that to the point of serious illness diagnosis. Our mission work is truly expanding equitable access to care for serious illnesses, and then examining how we are treating folks and working with families and supporting families at the end of life and beyond death, so that we are providing appropriate grief services and engaging folks with appropriate grief services following the death of their family member, friend, or loved one. We do that not by providing direct patient or family care, but by expanding systems through clinical and community education, workforce development, research, and advocacy.
Thank you. So your question is very similar to Kim's, but now we want to kind of take a spin into that community healthcare worker specifically and how implicit bias brings a greater cultural competence into the service delivery.
Yeah, so I've been working now for 4 or 5 years on developing opportunities for community health workers in serious illness space, starting with Journey Care and adding community health workers to our interdisciplinary care teams for hospice care. And through that work have also recently been appointed to the Illinois Department of Public Health's Community Health Worker Review Board, so that we're looking at standardizing education and licensure opportunities for community health workers, while at the same time not making those requirements, not setting those requirements in such a way that it loses the authenticity of who our most effective community health workers are. Because the most effective community health workers are authentic representatives of the communities where they serve. They live and work in those communities. They have natural relationships for outreach and connections to the patients and the organizations that they're working with. I too am reading Under the Skin, and I made a note that I wanted to bring that up tonight as well for all of you. Yeah, Linda Villarosa is an amazing author. It's such an easy read with really dense information. Along those lines, I also wanted to bring everyone's attention to the documentary Aftershock that also looks at maternal and infant death rates and the disparity by featuring 2 stories, and I will name these women, Shimoni Gibson and Amber Rose Isaac, who both, just in sharing a personal note, both of them suffered symptoms during their pregnancy and immediately after the birth of their children that I too experienced. I'm here today, they are not, and it is strictly, when you hear their stories, it is strictly because of their race and the way that they were perceived in describing their symptoms and the way that they, the systems that they had access to in their treatment and care. It to me is shameful that we, as the richest nation in this world, are not providing appropriate health care to every single one of the residents of our country. And so I aim to do that through the work at the HEP Foundation in just a small corner of the healthcare system in end-of-life care. Getting back to your question, though, sorry, I've gone off on my soapbox.
I will not stop when it's that good.
You know, we are really looking at, in end-of-life care, at having community health workers as people who navigate the system alongside families and really understand what resources are available in the community, what a family or an individual really expect culturally for their end-of-life care, what they want at the end of their life, what are their goals for care, and having those authentic relationships. One of our community health workers has recently been coordinator on a project with the University of Chicago and the Nork Center for Research in bringing community-based participatory research models into communities, specifically to identify knowledge, attitudes, and beliefs in Black communities of Chicago around end-of-life care. And we're really excited about the outcomes that we're seeing from the focus groups, the feedback that we're getting, and really putting that information to work at a systems level to better address care, but to get that information back into the community that gave it to us in the first place, so that we are really respectful of the time, the sharing, and the learning that we've had through them.
Thank you. All right, on to John. Can you please give us an introduction as to your background, please?
Good evening, everyone. And I will preface this by saying I thought I was coming to a program for middle school children. So this is not what I said yes to. So I'm a little bit, my answers may not be quite on par with, and I have not read the book, but I will go get it. I'm Executive Director of Independence Health and Therapy, and we are a community-based nonprofit. Based in Woodstock, we have 2 locations. We do adult day health services, we do behavioral health services, psychiatric services, counseling, community support, and we offer physical, speech, and occupational therapy. We've been around in one iteration or another for 75 years almost. Began as Easter Seals, although at that point, and we kind of talk about, language, that was the Society for Crippled Children, which is clearly not what you would call that population today. So, but that in the 1940s, that was acceptable language. In 2018, we merged 2 nonprofits together to create Independence Health and Therapy, and that has presented some unique opportunities for us to expand the services we offer, more specifically to expand the age ranges we offer. So today we serve, in the behavioral health side, ages 6 on up, including pediatric psychiatry, which we added back in the fall. So we're really proud of being able to make that effort and that step into bringing that to the community.
So your question is perfectly in line for what you do, which is how do you balance the ethical obligations to provide access to care with the practical limitations of resources, funding, and the existing bias that is inherent in all of our organizations?
Not really well. And it boils down to, we've had this conversation in our organization. Our financial model of business is not one that is viable from a financial perspective. We do not make money on what we do. Quite honestly, we lose money on every aspect of our business. And fortunately, as a nonprofit, we have the opportunity to try and raise money other ways. Grants, 708 boards, which is 2 new people on 708 boards. So we have that opportunity, but the reality is that our services are not one that we're going to generate revenue on to be able to cover our expenses. But part of that is a systemic issue in that we serve a Medicaid population. We serve an underinsured and uninsured population. And in the state of Illinois, so for folks who may not know, Medicaid is a federal program that's governed at the state level. So the state of Illinois sets the rates for Medicaid reimbursements that we get. Our population is predominantly Medicaid. So when you look at a reimbursement level, for example, psychiatry, an evaluation is, I believe, about $100 for an evaluation for a psychiatric evaluation, which takes about an hour. A treatment is $36. We are paying our psychiatrists approximately $250 an hour. So they may see 3 folks in an hour because it's a shorter visit. So you run the numbers, we are losing $120 to $130 per hour on our psychiatric services. Our physical, speech, and occupational therapy services, they have not changed the rates for the pediatric side since 2003, so 20 years. I have a 21-year-old and I have an 18-year-old, and they essentially have not changed the rates in the lifetime of my children to serve. And so you look at, we all talk about inflation today, but when you look at a 20-year spread of inflation, that is a radically diminished return for the care of folks that need care and have limited access to care. So at the core of who we are is we are about access to care. We check that against our mission. We check that against our vision. We have regular check-ins to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing and that we can figure out ways to afford it. But the system is not designed to serve the people that really, I mean, not that everybody needs service, but it's not designed to support the folks that really need it the most.
I think I've said wow for each one of you without my mic on. So thank you very much for that, John. Kim, back to you. So your next question is, what is the importance of using the correct pronouns when addressing patients in healthcare? And how can healthcare providers ensure that they use appropriate language? And I'm going to add just a little bit more because I don't know about where everybody else works, but I too work in the physical therapy world outside of education. And our forms, all of our electronic medical records, none of that has that opportunity. So how do we as healthcare workers address that?
There's a lot to do there. So I just tell you just a quick story. Today I had a student doing a lab exam, and he had a patient, one of his classmates, and he was saying, well, you could ask your wife or your girlfriend to borrow a razor to shave some of that hair off of your legs. And I made a little note in the margin, and afterward I said, is there a way that you could say that without assuming that your male patient has a wife or a girlfriend? And he knew exactly what I was talking about. He's like, oh my gosh, like you got to find ways. And it's not hard, but it can be embarrassing. So I have on my badge, and I wore this on purpose because I have she and her right here on my ribbon. And it might not be a big deal. Some people might be offended by it, but it matters to people who are transgender or gender diverse. We are seeing binary structure show up in all kinds of ways. When I was growing up, you went to the shampoo aisle, and there was, half a dozen different kinds of shampoo, and now you see shampoo for men and shampoo for women, and it goes on and on. There's soap, and then we could talk about the pink tax. The razor for women is going to be more expensive than the razors for men. It's just language, and it's not hard to do, and people who are gender diverse and people who are transgender and going through a process, the social stuff is the easy stuff, because the changing your name, the legal stuff is going to cost you $800 to $1,000, and many of them may not be interested in going through any medical transformation, and if they do, fine, and if they don't, they're still expressing themselves externally. So I think kind of like it's the least we can do, and there's going to be little hiccups on the way. But you can't, if you just look back at Chaucer and then later at Shakespeare, they were using pronouns that were non-gender specific. They used they and them. It's fluid, and I make some mistakes. And really, it's just, you just have to say, oh, I'm sorry, I'll do better. But this, when you're approaching somebody and you don't know, and your forms are not helping you, it's okay to say, hi, my name is Kim. How would you like me to address you? What would you like me to call you? I do that on the first day of my class. I don't even look at my roster. I give everybody an index card, and I say, please write the name that you want me to call you on the card, and then put your last name down so I don't, because I've had it where I'm like, I don't know who this person is. Like, what's that? Enrique is going by, and says something else somewhere else. So. And I might say, I'm trying to be respectful. How would you like to be addressed? Because I don't want other people to be upset and offended. And so you make a mistake, you misgender somebody, you just say, I'm sorry. Thanks for letting me know. And just move on. Don't make a big deal out of it. Because when you do, then it becomes their problem, and they have to make you feel better. And really, what? That doesn't make any sense. So it's just a really simple social action you can take. Keep it simple, just ask. And if you can't change the system, then work around it. If your documents and it drives me crazy, right? It took us a long time to get some of those forms changed in education. I think we're doing a lot better. And we're playing catch up in healthcare. Make sure that you have some way of allowing people to share the name that they would like to be called when they come into your clinic or your facility. And do your best not to dead name people. I think that's probably the word, and if you don't know what that is, it would be calling Loriano by his old name in front of other people. And it's very traumatic for people. So other things to think about are people who are part of the LGBTQI plus community, gender diverse, transgender. They have very unique healthcare needs. They have very unique, they need attention, and they have been harmed in lots of other places. They're dealing with discrimination in housing and employment, in their own families. They're being, pushed out. So if we are truly going to extend unconditional positive regard to the people in the community that we serve, then we need to do our best to provide services to individuals and support these folks who are transgender or gender diverse patients. I don't know anything about their experience, and I don't assume anything. I have to ask questions. It kind of gets back at that implicit bias. I looked at you express as a man. I'm assuming a lot of things about you because that's the way I grew up. And I can't just say, well, that's just how I am. Well, okay, but I can do better. I stepped into the role of being a healthcare provider, and I said I would treat people with unconditional positive regard. And that is a really hard thing to do, because you have to check your bias almost daily. I've had patients I remember one patient I had, he was handcuffed to the bed, and there was a police officer outside the door. I did not want to know what that person did, because I didn't want that to interfere with how I might see that person. I might not see them as human anymore. I might not see them as deserving of my services. I didn't want to do that. We do those things unconsciously. It's not on purpose. We do that stuff all the time. It doesn't take a lot just to be kind, right? That's all you have to do. Did I answer it?
Yes. Thank you. So, John, you kind of get the next half of that question. What do we do when the patient's preferred pronouns don't align with their legal name or other official documents?
I kind of feel like she answered that. So thank you. I appreciate that you tackling that. I think kind of at a bigger picture piece, not necessarily the practicality of because you touched a lot of that. It's you kind of start with the training of the staff and having staff be able to be trained to be prepared to adapt into those situations. And that really is across all the components of it. We really, we want our staff to feel like they belong, because then in turn our patients are going to feel like they belong. So Richard Branson, and I'm going to ruin his phrase, but really talked about taking care of your employees first, and then that will in turn take care of your customers. And so if our staff are trained in a way that they can, so McHenry County, admittedly I think is late to the game, but I'm sure most folks in here are familiar with trauma-informed care, which is a kind of a mode in behavioral health about essentially meeting people where they're at, and understanding that all of us have had experienced trauma in our lives, that it's affected us in a way that we may not even recognize at a point, and we're going to respond in a way that we wouldn't even recognize where that comes from. And so using that as that model of for employers, working with employees, and then staff working with clients, I think that's the way you get to this, where you have that moment to give yourself grace to address a mistake you made, and that the client will also have the grace to be able to accept your mistake, because there's a trust built into that relationship.
So we're going to pivot just a little bit here for Nicole's next question. Where do you see healthcare's ethical obligations to provide equitable care for the whole person, and is that being compromised today?
Yeah, well, I think one way that equitable care for the whole person is being compromised has been highlighted already, as we've talked a little bit about care for transgender people and and gender fluid people. You know, the legislation that's being passed in various states and really attacking that care, removing that care is of great ethical consideration, I think, for providers in those states. We're very fortunate in Illinois to not be faced with those decisions at this point. But, you know, and then I'll kind of look to my very narrow window of serious illness care in the system and say that, you know, another concern that I have is access to caregiver support and support for caregivers. And as even since we spoke about these questions, I'm grateful that President Biden has signed an executive order just last week to really dig in and give more support to caregivers. But it is inequitable because we have no system for right now regularly paying family caregivers, and the president's executive order has put a mandate into examining the opportunities to pay family caregivers for the work that they do, the time that they spend, and we're in a very, our system is has a huge dichotomy, a huge gap, because if you can afford to pay for additional support and private care, you have a much easier time caring for a loved one at the end of their life. So, you know, in addition, community-based serious illness care is not in every community. We are looking at huge gaps in more rural areas of our state. McHenry County alone has gaps in care where, you know, the southeast parts of the county have much greater access to care than other, you know, more northwest parts of the county, and it's care coverage gaps and the way that hospice and palliative care providers are positioned within the community and how they are licensed to provide care in communities. So really looking at ways to expand access by getting more care providers knowledgeable and effective in providing palliative medicine through their practices. So we're looking at ways to educate more general practitioners and treating specialists in effective palliative care so that they can be really working that into the care that they're already providing for the patients that they already see.
The delay. Tack onto that a little bit. That caregiver piece is actually a huge component of some of the challenges that our community faces. There are, if you run the numbers out, take a national sample and apply it to McHenry County, there are 40,000 unpaid caregivers in McHenry County. 25% of caregivers across the country are millennials. And so you continue to run those numbers down. So you're looking at about, you know, 10, 12,000 millennials that are caregivers in our county. And they are spending more of their dollar per dollar, not on an adjusted basis, but they're spending more of their own personal dollars taking care of their loved one than any of their other peers. And so when we talk about kind of equity, access to care, they're kind of falling through those cracks in that whole caregiver component. Because when, and again, you go back to some of this implicit bias, you really don't think of millennials as being caregivers, but they are. And so we don't think about them in that way. And there's, you know, 10,000 of them in our county. So, you know, we know them, we just don't really know them.
I want to say something amazing to that, but all I have is wow. I just keep saying the same thing. Thank you for that, John. I appreciate that. Kim, this kind of can transition into that quite nicely. How do we need to change our educational system to fit these issues that we have just seen and talked about?
Waiting for that delay. There we go. Well, earlier, was that your provost, your vice president, a president? He mentioned how quickly community colleges pivot and respond to the needs of industry, and they do. And I've seen it, in 27 years. But some things happen really slow. So education really is key. But we've got some issues. In physical therapy, 80% of the educators are white. A lot of them are women. And we're graduating this last year, 68% of the graduates in physical therapy careers were white. That's an improvement. 5 years ago, it was something like 75%. So we're making gains. We're moving the needle mostly with Hispanic Latinx students. We're really not seeing much change anywhere else. So we've got some work to do, because if it's mostly white people who are educators, and we've got this group think, right? We're bringing in our implicit bias and we're perpetuating that. So we need to make some changes, and there are, fortunately, other forces at play. And the state has a diversity task force, and they come out with an annual report, and they make these recommendations that we need to go out and meet those future students where they are in 5th grade, in 7th grade, and 8th grade, and we need to expose them, not just a career day, like you can be me, you can be a PT, but let them experience physical therapy, because they don't know what it is. They don't know what nurses do. They think, they have a picture of what a nurse is, or a picture of what they probably don't know what an occupational therapist is. They're probably nowhere in their framework. So it's not just having a career day, but it's getting out there and allowing them to experience. I have these dreams one day when I retire, I'm going to go with a bunch of 5th graders and say, hey, what's going on at home? Does your mom have bad knees? Here's some exercises. And see if they can, I just think that would be kind of cool to do. Or do some, community education. We're starting to see, there's a local physical therapist who has his own clinic in North Aurora, and he's coming to park districts doing, I'm going to do a talk on arthritis this month. I'm going to do a talk on balance this month. Getting out in the community, we really need to broaden our horizons. And other things that are just driving me crazy in education, textbooks. I have a large person, not always, but kind of cyclic, pretty diverse classroom. And I'm apologizing to my students that I don't have pictures in the textbook until we get to the chapter on cultural diversity. There's no people of color in those books. And I'm not talking old books, I'm talking new books. And I remember one vendor came and wanted to show us these video simulations that they were making, and I watched and listened to the presentation. I said, you know what, I'm sorry, but it is 2022, you are out of step. There are no people of color in any of those videos. And they were like, oh, I know you're right. I'm like, well, do you have any people of color on your board? Or like, no, we don't. So we really need to do a better job of somehow either, if I'm gonna be white, which I am, I can't change that, then I need to bring in diverse perspectives into my classroom. So I have a little hope about that. There are some bright spots too with our professional organizations that they're taking stances and saying we are going to be an anti-racist organization. We're not just gonna celebrate cultural diversity. We are going to look at our processes that are in place and try to dismantle those, because some of those processes disenfranchise people and keep people out. I serve on that task force for the Illinois Physical Therapy Association, and there's been some really interesting conversations, but even in our own association, to make sure that all of the presentations are bringing in diverse perspectives. Is that happening? And it's not happening all the time. We're doing better. We're doing better. Books like Under the Skin make me really excited, but you want to know what really makes me excited? My students. Because I have given them a voice. They have come in. So I'm just going to out ECC. They did this great video of our program. They came in, they interviewed me, they featured a student, they came in and video taped a lab in the class, and after all of the footage fell to the cutting room floor, the students of color were always in the blurred background. And they came to my office and said, "Did you watch it?" And I said, "Yeah." And I didn't really watch it because I hate seeing myself. And they said, "Did you see where, Natalia was? Did you see?" I'm like, "No, what?" And they're like, "Put it on, watch." And they were right. And I think that's not intentional. I think that's subconscious bias. We can even look at these posters here. You've got some gender diversity there, but you really don't have a lot. I mean, we need for people to see themselves, right? And it's not on purpose. So what makes me really hopeful is those students. I've given them voice. They're advocating for themselves. They're making their own videos and pictures. We did some stuff to try to demonstrate pressure, like what does dark skin look like when it's developing pressure. They made their own pictures. They made one of their classmates sit and not move. Okay, it wasn't that great, but they're trying, get the idea that they are advocating for themselves, and they're saying, we're not going to sit here and wait for somebody to do it for us. We're going to do it. And yay. And I'm going to help them.
Add to that? Yeah, I think we also need to be looking at a larger systems level. There is a cost barrier to entering healthcare professions, and so looking at changing how we structure education for healthcare professions, especially for entry-level healthcare professions, so that we're building in and really looking at models of apprenticeship and working with local workforce development boards. I'm looking at a workforce development board representative in the audience to really explore some different models for training and educating the future workforce in healthcare professions. There's a great group, Chicago Apprenticeship Network, that is looking at expanding apprenticeship models across professions, but Rush University is doing some really interesting work in hospital and healthcare settings, and we at the HAP Foundation are looking at ways of expanding healthcare apprenticeships to build the future workforce in different ways, not changing the education, but changing the access to the education.
Well, I am terribly sorry, but we got through half of the questions. So I'm just going to bring up the one final question to all of you and kind of the big takeaway. How can healthcare providers, healthcare companies, healthcare industries best support our patients in advocacy while fulfilling our professional obligations to be fiscally and financially responsible and ethical? Kind of big takeaway. Any of you, jump on it.
Oh my gosh. I don't have a huge answer for this. When I think about advocacy, I don't think just about advocating for the needs of an individual person, but I know all my legislators by name, and I have their phone numbers in my phone, and I can call them. And they know that they can call me, and they've invited me. I was shocked the first time I was invited. Hey, we're starting this community forum on education, and I was the only higher ed person on that committee. And that's great. So you got to take advantage of those opportunities and truly advocate, not just on that one-on-one level, because if you want to make change, you better go big, right? So that's the first thing I would say. Do the legislative work, do the policy work, get your voice heard. And we are the ones, if you're a provider, you are the ones who have the personal stories that have impact. And there is nothing more powerful when you're talking to a legislator to tell them that story, because that sticks. I can go in there with data, I can share my perspective, but unless I have a story of a student who didn't make it because of X, Y, Z, those stories matter. I think the best thing you can also do is just take responsibility for your own education. Get informed and listen to people's stories. Don't go in with, what you think is happening. I don't understand why these parents don't have copies of all of their kids' like vaccinations. I work at a camp in the summertime and drives me crazy. But guess what? I have a printer at home and I have paper. It doesn't always, I think it's out of paper right now, so I can't print anything. But yeah, my notes, that's just exactly my notes. But engage, listen, get educated, look at data, read books, and then reflect on those things and grow from those experiences. It's not just enough to do it. You've got to, the best practitioners are reflective practitioners. And the people who make change are the people who are listening, and they don't do it by themselves. They're carrying everybody with them. It takes an army, right? You can't do it by yourself. We were just in Springfield last week. I have a kid who wants to be a political scientist, imagine. Imagine that. So we went to Springfield, and, while we were there, he was able to see people, walking around with signs and a mob of people around this legislator and talking about what mattered and what cared and telling their stories. And what comes out of that? Some language is crafted in the Legislative Research Bureau, and then it lands on the floor, it goes to a committee, and pretty soon you've made some real substantive change. So that's what I would say.
I would add to that, one way that you can start making the change within your own organizations and your own practice, be really intentional about who you hire, and really look to hire to represent the patients that you serve. Hire to represent the community as a whole, and really be intentional about hiring for diversity to bring different perspectives, and not just bring them into the organization, but listen to what they are saying when they are in the organization. Value the perspective and the experiences that they bring to your organization, and implement the changes that people are pushing for. And this is not just racial and ethnic diversity, age diversity. Listen to the younger folks on your staff. They have great ideas. They have a different perspective on our nation, our world, our communities, and they have a much more expansive view on what it means to be of service and to care for people. And a lot of the conversation that we've had tonight around gender equity, gender diversity, racial and ethnic diversity, younger people they've just grown up with that as their reality. It's not that they do think about it. They think they consider it very thoughtfully, and most of them are asking why it got to this point and why those of us on stage who are of a more advanced age and experience, why we didn't solve the problem ourselves before.
On to that, that younger generation of employees, they also expect a different work environment and a different outcome from work. And we are actually uniquely positioned to meet that need because they want to see an impact of the work that they do. And so, but I'm Gen X. I grew up, you went to work, you did what you did, you didn't talk to your boss. That was the framework within which I grew up in the work world, right? So I have to learn how to understand and adjust to the new workforce that's coming in because that's not how they work. So I have to figure out their language, and I have to, so I have an 18-year-old, like I mentioned, and kind of the pronoun piece, admittedly, I am fully on board with it, but I struggle in utilizing it well because I default to grammar. And that really is what it boils down to. So I find myself trying to use it correctly and understand it. But for my 18-year-old, it is as normal as the day is, and it should be normal. And I don't want to imply it's not. It's just it's a frame of reference. You know, it's you said it before. This is not how we grew up, but that's not because we didn't grow up wrong. But today it's different, so we need to adapt and adjust to today. So when you're looking at a workforce, that younger workforce, we're well positioned to bring them in and have them be part of our teams because we do make impact. And it's tangible, visible impact that they can go home at the end of the day and say, I did this.
I just want to say thank you so much. That hour went very, very quickly. Wonderful insights and information from each one of you, and I think I can share it with everybody that we owe you a very big thank you for giving us your time and your expertise and your knowledge.
You again. So glad to have you with us. To close out this section, I'd like to introduce you to our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Arlene Santos-George.
Okay, I'm a little small, so I'm going to lower the mic. So that was a very illuminating panel discussion on patient advocacy and the implications to equity and diversity. I will make sure that I buy that book, Under the Skin, and Aftershock is what I got, right? Anyway, it is my pleasure to make a few closing remarks, express gratitude to all those who made this event a reality, and more importantly, suggest ways for you to continue to be engaged with MCC and its healthcare programs. So first and foremost, on behalf of McHenry County College and its event partners, I would like to thank all participants today and congratulate you for making the annual MCC Healthcare Forum such a successful event. So thank you so much. Thank you to Dr. Gabbard, if he is still here, for a very warm welcome and informative update about the college. And then next, many thanks to our panelists, John Buckley, Noel Moore, and Kimberly Tarver, for spending time with us to share their expertise and thoughts about patient advocacy and some ethical implications. But let us not forget a big thank you to Catherine Jones and the workforce development staff for organizing the event. Thank you also to MCC faculty and staff who contributed their time to preparing for or participating in this event. So with such a good attendance today, it is evident that McHenry County's healthcare industry is a strong and robust sector because of its engaged leaders and workforce. Most importantly, it is because of this relationship between the healthcare industry and its stakeholders, such as McHenry County College and McHenry County's workforce development ecosystem. I see that you are from workforce, right? So as you leave today, it is a good time to say that McHenry County College looks forward to our continued partnership and collaboration with the healthcare sector. Here are some ways for that collaboration. So one of the critical needs of MCC's nursing and allied health programs is the availability of clinical sites. So we can only expand these programs if we have more healthcare facilities as clinical sites. So expand we must to provide McHenry County's labor needs for nurses and other allied health workers. So we would really appreciate it if we can get some more clinical sites. We also appreciate you serving on an advisory committee for MCC's programs to be guided by employers' needs for current skills in the industry. So thank you so much for taking the another hour or so with your participation in the advisory meetings. You can also provide an in-person or virtual tour of your facilities or host an MCC student for an internship or job shadowing, or participate in a patient simulation, or hire a SCOT for recruiting, or support an MCC student's future with a scholarship, or complete an annual employer training assessment, or schedule an MCC to go information session, or all of the above. So there are just so many varied ways that the healthcare industry partners with MCC. And so with that said, I end by encouraging everyone to continue to work together to serve the healthcare workforce needs of McHenry County. MCC always welcomes your partnership. So thank you to everyone for coming.
Now, a few logistics. If you are attending the Nursing Advisory Committee, you're staying right here in this room. We're going to switch the stage a little bit. If you're moving to any of the other advisories, you're going to go right back past the food and then proceed up to our conference center rooms, and we'll help you get there. As you are leaving, I want to make sure that you have one of these flyers. You heard Dr. Gabbard talk about the PATH grant. You heard our panelists talk about what it's going to take to change healthcare in this country. This is an incredible linkage to that. So employers, for your incumbent workers, we can help to skill them up. Educators, for your students who are considering education in the healthcare careers, this PATH grant can be an incredible connection point for us to do that. So lots of these flyers, you'll see them around. People will be trying to hand you multiple of them. You're also going to be able to get them through a virtual backpack. So on the front of your program booklet, you have a QR code that links you to a virtual backpack that contains all of the resources that you connected with in the resource zone earlier tonight. All right, so now, advisory committees, let us know if you have any questions as you move to your next session. Thank you.